Hello and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we are finally talking about Star Wars Temptation of the Force by Tessa Gratton. It's the second adult novel in the High Republic, Phase 3. Here we go.
We recorded an interview with Tessa when the book came out, essentially, and we said our discussion would be coming very, very soon.
We lied.
No, I was about to say is now not very, very soon. We're a little bit behind where we expected to be putting this one out, but we're glad you stuck with us and have clicked on this episode because we are really excited to bring you our discussion of this book right here, right now.
Yeah, we were having like a hot Acolyte summer because the Acolyte started, what was it, the week before Temptation of the Force?
Yeah.
And now we've been like slowly going and releasing some of our backlogged like interviews, Tessa included. And yeah, now here we are. So we had to get this one out sooner rather than later because we got two more High Republic books coming out at the end of August and at the end of September in both Beware the Nameless and Tears of the Nameless, which are both middle grade and YA respectively. We got a really good fall coming up though, I feel like, for books.
I think so too.
Yeah. Which I guess housekeeping items, we shouted out our interview with Tessa. We also did a whole episode on San Diego Comic-Con and book news. We packed it into its own thing because if we did it here, we'd be here for 4 hours. So go check out that episode because we talked all about Acolyte tie-in novels and the Reign of the Empire trilogy and why we're excited about it. If you don't know what it is, it's a brand new trilogy set during the time of the Empire and when the rebellion is being born. So very exciting stuff. I can't wait.
Yeah. Focusing on Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera. Like, are we
we're back?
That came out of my brain. Like, they did that for me, you know? Anyway, my brain. I'm so excited. Anyway, who needs coherent thought?
Right.
When you have great authors who write great books to enjoy.
Well, now that we've vamped for 5 minutes, welcome back, everybody. For those of you who might have just found us, we talk about High Republic books all the time. We've been talking about them ever since the High Republic started.
One.
Every single book has a book discussion on our podcast feed. So if you're going through your High Republic journey, come along with us. So today we're talking about Temptation. Full disclaimer up front. We will talk about anything that has come out in the High Republic. It's all on the table up until this point. So if you haven't read a certain book yet, you might want to go in like chronological order or go back a book discussion or two just to not have anything spoiled. But we talk about everything. It's all there. Just to give that disclaimer, because we've had a couple people who do like different reading orders, like some people who are doing phase 1, phase 3, and then phase 2.
Right.
Phase 2 is on the table. Anything that's come out could be brought up in this discussion.
Yeah, so just as a fair warning, we really like this book, so be prepared.
Very excited. Yeah.
For hyped conversation.
Well, if you have nothing else to say, before we dive into Temptation of the Force, do you want to kick us off with our independent bookstore of the week?
Yeah, and this one comes to us courtesy of Brad.
Yes.
Woo-hoo! So thank you, Brad. And today's independent bookstore of the week is Boulder Bookstore. Now, where is Boulder Bookstore, you might ask? Guys, I got this one. It's in Boulder, Colorado. A beautiful city with the mountains. Oh my gosh. I did not go to the university that is located in Boulder, Colorado, but I did get a sweatshirt when I toured there because their mascot is the bison. So
very
it was
classy.
important to me that I had that because I love bison. Anyway, Boulder Bookstore is, unsurprisingly, Boulder's largest independent bookstore. They were founded in 1973, so they've been around for a while, and now they employ about 50 people, occupy a 20,000 square feet of building space, and have more than 100,000 titles across 3 floors. You could probably find anything and everything at Boulder Bookstore, probably including vintage Star Wars titles that are like hidden in nooks and crannies in the store. You know what I'm saying? Like used books, new books, everything in between. The building that it's located in itself is a historic building built in 1899, which is cool. And they also host over, I think, 200 events a year. So if you are a Colorado local and you haven't I mean, I understand that Colorado's a big state and a lot of it's like not city, and not town, but like if you are northern-ish Colorado local, check out Boulder Bookstore, and it is a historic building that it resides in. Brad, say more things.
Yeah, I've been there. I was there in 2018 or 2019. I bought several Stephen King books, and it's huge. It's giant. Like when they say 20,000 square feet, this place is humongous. I was shocked when I went in there. It's three floors. Only other bookstore that I've seen rival this one, at least in size, is the Lincoln Square Barnes and Noble, which is also like 5 stories tall. It's ginormous also. Would recommend. You can also order books online from them. So check them out. Link is in the description in this episode.
Yeah, and their website is boulderbookstore.net. I'm looking at their events calendar right now. It looks like they have some poetry reading and open mic poetry nights as alongside a ton of author events. So
pretty cool. Well, it's been a minute since we've done our independent bookstore. I think last discussion we've done was Eye of Darkness.
Maybe? No, Defy.
No? Oh, Defy the Storm. That's right. Well, it's been a minute since we've done a full-blown book discussion. So this is a good reminder to shop local if you can. I know prices are typically higher than your average Amazon, but invest in your community if you can. It goes a long way.
The prices are higher because Amazon is okay with losing money on their books.
Yes.
Independent bookstores are just selling them at market price. Amazon is like, we don't need books to be our moneymaker. That's what's happening there. It's not like the independent bookstores are like, let's mark this up a ton of bucks.
Right. Yeah, and Amazon has a whole Kindle thing going on. They're like, that's where we make our money. Cheap electronic ebooks on our devices that we sell millions of a year.
And then we put ads on the front of them.
Yeah.
You buy the device and then you put ads on it.
So buy local, invest in your community. Bookstores are the linchpin of communities, in my opinion. It's where thought happens. It's where conversation happens. It's where collaboration, joy happens. So many good things.
Bookstores and libraries. I just want to put those two together. We love books here.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for sharing.
Of books, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of books, we're going to talk about Temptation of the Force. So once again, spoilers ahead. Anything up until now in the High Republic is on the table. We're going to talk about characters, talk about big moments that happen throughout the book. We're going to have a lot of egg talk.
Yeah, that's going to be the key. Who cares about anything else? We're here for egg talk.
I think this might be like one of the more egg talky episodes because like so much of what happens in this book is related to our ideas around egg talk and the Nameless and what do the Jedi fear and all those like big picture concepts of the High Republic.
Right.
That's where our focus and interest is. We get a lot of Burry in this book, some good Bell content. And then we'll end with our odds and ends as usual, things that we want to shout out before we close out. So
that's right.
Let's get into it. Let's do this thing.
Let's.
Sarah, you had a really good book experience. Not that I didn't. I had an awesome experience reading this as well. Mine was a little more spaced out than I would have liked. But you plowed through this thing. That
hot acolyte summer really came for you.
I really squirreled like completely. I was like reading and then Destiny, the Final Shake came out and then I was focused on that. And then Acolyte was happening and I was focused on that. Reader, this is my fault. Why we're doing this so late. Let's be real. Let's be real.
We don't have to worry about it too hard. Yeah, I had a really good reading experience for this one. Earlier this year, this is TMI, but I do not care. So it's not that like bad TMI. A couple years ago, Brad went to New York Comic Con and he got me an RJ Julia past bookstore of the week on the pod journal, and it's just been sitting around because it's how do you go about like choosing a journal for anything? It's like once you've written in it, then it's like, oh my god, now I can only write in it for this one thing. Anyway, earlier this year, I used it for the Star Wars conference thing that I went to, and I said, aha, this will be my Star Wars journal. And that's where all my notes have been for Acolyte. That's also how I took notes for Temptation of the Force. Now, listener, you might think this is unremarkable, but Brad, do I take notes?
No.
Correct. And I took notes for this book. So, it was serious when I'm like writing down like absolutely chaotic thoughts, including let's see, including Drengir are back, baby. And that's how I wrote that. Including a lot of scribbles about the diadem, just like literally me scribbling. I was so excited. Smooching, exclamation point, and also a lot of scribbles. And then also, maybe we'll post this somewhere later, but for the very last chapter, I wrote sicko derogatory about Marchion Ro multiple times, which is a great thing to look back upon, you know? It's a great thing to look back upon. And I enjoyed the audiobook for this one as I was doing puzzles and frantically writing notes as The Acolyte was coming out. I had a good reading experience for this one, team. Brad prompted the share, so now I've overshared.
What do you like the most about this book? Because this is one that we've both been anticipating for a while, especially when we got the cover that had Elzar and Avar. You know, the Eye of Darkness ends with them being reunited and like the pinky touch kind of moment. And we waited many, many months for this book to be in our hands. But like, did this meet your expectations? Were you happy with what happened and kind of like where we ended, looking ahead to Trials of the Jedi? Where are you at with the High Republic Phase 3 now?
Yeah, so I've been waiting for this book in particular since January 2021, chapter 23 of Light of the Jedi, when they're on Naboo. And Avar is like pining after Elzar a little bit. And I was like, oh my God. So I've been waiting for this whole time. And yeah, Tessa did a brilliant job, I think. In our interview with her, she talked a bit about how the task was a little bit like, make this The Empire Strikes Back, which is crazy, like a crazy ask of anybody to do. Like, hi, can you recreate the magic of Empire Strikes Back in book form? No pressure. And I think that she did a really great job of that. Like, all the stakes are building, the action is intense, the romance at the center of this book is so delicious and warm and gentle, and like where the characters all are is so compelling. I was so along for the ride in here and was just giggling, kicking my feet as it continued. I really had a great time with this book. And then the last chapter comes out of nowhere and you're like, oh, sicko, derogatory, like, and it sets up, as opposed to being a lot of what we've gotten in past High Republic books, which is this like devastating cliffhanger that ruins our lives for many moons, a la Rising Storm, or even kind of like what's happening throughout the Falling Star. These books have kind of this phase has kind of ended on these more like to be continued notes, which I really like. They feel a little bit, although like Eye of Darkness was like, no, you're giving us this hint and then you're gonna take it away from us for many moons, like, but yeah, no, I really enjoy kind of the push forward at the end of these books that we're getting. And really, Temptation of the Force is right up there with my very, very favorite High Republic books, including, Rising Storm, Race to Crash Point Tower, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I just really love this one. And I am so happy it exists. She did it for me, this feels like a book that is so squarely in like, this is Sarah's thing, which is so satisfying, because sometimes Star Wars is not that, and that's okay when it's not. Like, Star Wars is a lot of things for a lot of different kinds of people, but I love when it's for me. I can't lie. What about you, Brad? How did this book feel? And what was your experience of the Avzar of it all?
Yeah, I love this book. I had a great time. Again, it was spread out much more than I would have liked. I wish I had done it more kind of closer together. But what we did get in this book was very fascinating from a character standpoint. And Avar and Elzar being on the cover, and their pining, their romance, their intimacy. I feel like, in the past between the two of them, it has been such a slow burn. And
yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily describe their relationship as lustful. It feels very respectful. It feels very, it's passionate, right? But it's not like it's not like they're losing themselves within the relationship, right? It's not like the Anakin Padme kind of I don't want to say like toxicity, but like that is so lustful that, you know, it drives Anakin to the dark side, right? Like his passion and his sort of selfishness over that relationship is what sends him over the edge. Whereas I feel like characters like Avar and Elzar, Avar is his anchor point to keep bringing him back to the light when he is verging on darkness, on the tip of darkness. And so that I feel like is really key with these two characters. I love how they're explored. There are like certain chapters in this book that people kept alluding to, like, oh, you got to do chapter 1. Oh, you got chapter 36. Oh, you got chapter 53. Oh, you got chapter 61. You know, like, and people talking about those chapters specifically, you just knew you're getting some good Avar and Elzar content.
Yeah.
Aside from that, you know, we continue with the Blight, which I think the Blight is very interesting. I know people have opinions about, oh, you know, another mass event thing happening, but like, I feel like there's more to the Blight than we realize within the context of fear and the sins done to the Nameless and so many things that are going to be really critical to the end of the High Republic. And I love it.
The Blight is the key to all of this because it stands in juxtaposition to the Nameless, who have never done anything wrong, babies ooh.
Yeah. What I think is unique about the Blight is that it's not just a mass weapon. And I understand Marchion is trying to make it into a mass weapon of some kind
Of
that he can
course.
use and to carve himself a place within the Republic, or I guess like within the core worlds, and kind of assert himself as the savior. It is a symptom of the Force. The Force is sickening. The Force is dying. And this is the result. And I think those concepts are really fun to play with. And there is a particular moment at the end of this book with Buryaga that we are going to talk about very extensively and how it links to Egg Talk. And I will say it is the word homesick that when you and I read it, we were like, holy shit, everything we've been theorizing is not, in fact, out of this world and uncalled for. Like we are reading between the lines, and this book is kind of confirming some of those thoughts. So
I can't wait to be proven completely wrong when we read Trials of the Jedi, but I'm enjoying living in the present. You know what I'm saying? My feet are on the ground. I am here in the moment, and I am right.
Yeah. So I'm saying a lot of nonsense right now. I feel like I'm just like vamping and I should shut up. But
no, you're fine.
I really like this book. A lot of good stuff. And yeah, it tees up Trials of the Jedi perfectly. I'm curious to see what happens in Tears and Beware the Nameless. That leads into the final wave of the High Republic, because we don't have that many books left. Like we're almost done. It's scary. This is the penultimate adult novel of the High Republic. Like we are now going into a Charles Soule adult novel to close us out. That is wild. And we got Claudia coming back, Justina coming back. We are ending it all.
And if I cried right here, right now, at the beginning of this podcast, it feels so wild to me that we have, you know, invested so much time into reading and enjoying these stories, into talking about them with one another, and talking about them here on the podcast, and engaging with the wider Star Wars community in that way. To be almost at the end of that is so weird, because so much of our Star Wars identities has been tied for quite a while now very closely to our enjoyment of the High Republic. And it's wild to me that there will be a time post that a little bit, but and there's been no wrong time to dive into the High Republic. So in my next statement, I don't mean to say that, but it's such a privilege to have been on this journey since the very beginning, and to yap about it together, because it's been so much fun. Like it's weird that we'll know how things end.
The High Republic can never be over if I just don't read Trials of the Jedi, right? It can't end.
So here's the deal. I'm actually a big subscriber of that. I never finished Hannibal. I know how it ends. I love Hannibal. I know how it ends. I never finished season 3. I haven't yet read Mirrored Heavens, which is the third book in the Between Earth and Sky series by Rebecca Brunhorst. Black Sun, my favorite book of all time, pretty much. I haven't read it because I I'm afraid to know how it ends. I trust her. Like I know she's gonna do a good job with it. I've heard good things about this book, but I fear it. So yeah. If I mysteriously disappear next spring and you're like, I can't contact Sarah to do this book discussion, why isn't Sarah responding to my text messages? It's because I've gone into hiding to refuse the end of the High Republic. Brad's like, oh no. Brad's like, let me make sure I know her address so I can come find her. But yeah, it's crazy. And I just hope for a good ending for all of our characters. And by good ending, I don't necessarily mean that they all have to live, because I think that would be a little hopeful from me. But I hope that however these characters end, that it does the story justice and it does them justice. So I know what this is. We're not about to talk about Trials of the Force or Trials of the Jedi yet, and I feel like I'm doing a send-off monologue here, but yeah, it's wild to think that we've been on this road for so long, and finally Avar and Elzar are kissing. They deserved that since day one. They've deserved that since day one.
Well, they're doing a little more than kissing in this book, and let me just say, the pantsless Elzar Man fans are winning. We are winning. You all have been looking at me like I'm a joker, like I'm a clown all these years, mentioning that one time Elzar Man had no pants on. And let me tell you, he once again had no pants on in this book.
I mean,
look who's laughing now. Look who's laughing now.
He's got to like change his outfit like daily. Like he's pantsless on the regular, but just like I'm choosing not to talk about pantsless Elzar Man. But good for him. Do you want to know my note for that scene?
Let me hear it.
Hope it was good, babes. Heart.
Hope it was worth it.
Hope it was good.
Breaking the Jedi code.
Yeah. And that was just me being supportive on the side. You go.
You know, one might be able to draw the conclusion, if not for a little steamy lovemaking, could they have staved off the Nameless at the end of this book? One might say no. Okay, so we have a lot to cover, and I think on the topic of Avar and Elzar, let's start with them, right? Kind of where they're at in this book, and on their respective journeys, and then maybe some of like the bigger critical moments of their intertwining, let's say, throughout this one. So
wow, we're just gonna like put a ton of like euphemisms throughout this entire thing, are we?
How many can I fit in before the hour?
Right.
Elzar is very, very troubled at the start of this book. He is, still like that liaison. He is tired of all the meetings. He's tired of Tia Toon. Who wouldn't be tired of Senator Tia Toon? We all are. I saw that guy come back. I was like, I've had enough of this guy. Points at that one Always Sunny meme.
He provides an interesting counterpoint, though. So I value a Tia Toon presence in my Star War. Just generally.
Yeah.
Unlike Key Lori of Uwan Duwalin, who I can take out of my Star War any
Not
day.
the Key Lori mention. But Elzar is super sick of bureaucracy too. Like, I thought it was really interesting how he was viewing the Republic and viewing it in a sort of cynical way of recognizing we're directing a lot of our resources towards planets who have something to offer to the Republic, right? Like, we're not helping the planets who really need the help. We're helping the planets that have viable resources that we can use. And I was like, ooh, that's a little troublesome. And also him being a little cynical about the fact that, do people here even realize that there is a war happening? Like, do they even know what's going on? Here on Coruscant, people think the Nile don't exist. They're just sort of living their lives and nothing else matters. And that to me is, I think, where he is sort of sick of all of this stuff. And he's offered a seat on the council. He's still dealing with the Chansey Yarrow murder that he committed, and Vernestra confronting him. And I feel like he is so afraid of making the wrong choice that he's sort of not making any choices at all. He's not making any choices for himself, things that might benefit him, things that might be good for him or healthy for him. And he's sort of this, like, he's very aversive to anything that might be a nice thing to have in his life. And particularly Avar, right? Like she's back from beyond the storm wall. She has had so much time away from him. And now she's like, I pushed Elzar away when he came to me for comfort and for guidance, and I like ran away. But now I recognize that I don't have to be just committed to duty and to being like the leader of the Jedi. Like I can also have nice things for myself. And so Avar is like right away pursuing that. She wants Elzar. She knows right from chapter 1 that she loves him. But if she says it, she's afraid he might run away again. And I think he would, because he does in chapter 36 when she says it.
He goes, and we're kissing, and he's like, bye.
But it's so interesting how they're kind of in different parts of their life. Like Elzar knows he wants Avar, but he's so afraid that if he makes that choice and does something good for himself, like all the bad things he's done, he might sort of self-sabotage in a way of like, I don't deserve this. It's not right for me. I've done bad things. I'm just gonna avoid the situation entirely.
Kind of starting with Elzar, I want to hit what you're talking about on Coruscant first before we kind of like dive into their relationship specifically, because he points out something really valid, right? Like the Republic is the center of where a lot of the efforts of resistance are being organized by the Jedi, because they've recalled everybody to Coruscant. But in doing so, in having everything kind of be top down, right, in a way, you have all these people who are so not proximate to the suffering, and who, because it doesn't affect their daily lives, can put it out of their mind. And like, this is something that occurs to us all the time as people of various privileges who live in the US, right? Like things are happening throughout the world all the time and in the US, but since we aren't proximate to that, since it doesn't affect our day-to-day lives, it's easy to move forward without thinking about it or without putting considerable efforts into changing things. And that's really what Elzar is seeing, is like, yeah, people are doing things, but it's so far away, it's so out of these people's mind, because it doesn't affect who they need to be or who they are on a daily basis. And I thought that was a thoughtful observation for Elzar to be making, because he's been on both sides of that. And it's interesting that he's been the one to fill in, Stellan's sort of role as a Republic or liaison with the Republic, because he doesn't feel like he's fit for that. I mean, there's also the general like being in Stellan's shadow, which is difficult for him. Which, babe, you got to get out of there.
He does grow the beard. He's like, I guess if I'm going to be in the shadow, I should have a 5 o'clock shadow and then turn it into a nice luscious beard. Clearly. Right. It's symbolic.
But, I think he sees the three of them and he doesn't include himself in the greatness of his friends. And I think that's a real killer, because there's nothing sinister about that. Right? There's nothing sinister about their friendship. Or maybe they're more than friendship, whatever the three of them may have been in the past and continued to be into adulthood, right? They're people who love and care for each other, and who are all great. But when you're around great people and you don't feel like you live up to that, you do a lot of self-sabotage. And like, that's a really interesting position that Elzar finds himself in. And yeah, I just think that the role that Elzar is taking on and that he's had to adapt to doing to, survive and thrive to a certain degree in the post Starlight world is really interesting. You said that Avar and Elzar are at different parts in their lives, but I think they're just both trying to independently survive. I think about 2020. I think about a lot of things that are happening in my loved ones, friends and family this year that are very difficult. And it's not that they're on any different path. It's that things have happened to them that have put them into survival mode. And in survival mode, all you can do is put one foot in front of the other. And I think that's where they both are and have been for a while.
Part of what you're saying about Elzar's view of the galaxy and his sort of, I think that's really what informs him not taking the council seat either, because he has built up this image of himself in his mind where he condemns what he's done, and he feels like he needs to be out there doing something to help. We saw that a little bit in the Eye of Darkness, and it led to that whole fleet getting destroyed when they tried to cross the storm wall. So even that kind of went wrong, but he still feels like sitting here on the council, being in this ivory tower on this planet where nobody thinks of what's going on because they're so privileged doesn't feel right either. And I think like Avar being back and Avar wanting to go back across the storm wall, maybe they can do that together, gives him like a little bit more confidence that, hey, if we do this thing together, maybe things won't go as wrong. But I still want to distance myself a little bit from you loving wise, because I know if I love too hard, I might teeter back into the territory of I love you too much. Therefore, I might do something wrong in the process of protecting that love. And that's sort of what they battle with throughout much of the book, is like, will they, won't they? You know, that first chapter, I don't know about you, but I was like, damn, Tessa's feeding us right off the bat.
I know.
You know, they're in Elzar's quarters. They're drinking pink apple juice.
He's like, it's his quarters. And so I just, this image of like him opening the door, and he's like, without, we're not wearing shoes. And there's this one line of him like wiggling his toes in the carpet. And I'm like, oh, we're in a very comfortable moment right now. It was just so warm and comfortable. You mentioned earlier that like the relationship between Avar and Elzar being different than the relationship between Padme and Anakin. It's because they just have this like knowingness of each other and this comfortability, this like really built up intimacy with each other because they've literally known each other their entire lives.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of intimacy too, the amount of times they say each other's, no, I'm not going there yet. I'm saying the amount of times they say each other's names. I think they have a name kink. That's all I'm saying. Like, how many times in this book where they're just like, Avar, Elzar, Avar, Elzar.
Do you not?
It's like, what's going on?
Do you not say your loved one's name all the time? Like, just to like really acknowledge who they are? Like, hey, name. Hey, name.
I just think of them like holding each other back of their heads, like tilting their foreheads against each other and just repeatedly saying each other's names. It's
also like Chimera in episode 6. He says, Osha like 6 or 7 times. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
He's acknowledging her. That's hot.
And then even chapter 20, where Elzar gifts her the new diadem, right? And it says here, quote, she peered into his eyes because when they were young, she'd assumed their destiny with the Force would be the same, or at least run parallel. They'd be together in it forever. She was starting to believe that again. The pull to him, the need for him, it couldn't be wrong. It didn't feel wrong. And so, like, I love that this sort of this undeniable feeling, like, can't be undeniable any longer. Like, they're both about to explode. Like, or at least I think Avar more so. Elzar, I feel like a lot of what we get is Avar's perspective of like her wanting to just blurt it out, which I find fascinating. But again, like Elzar is so kind of in a shell. He's afraid to do anything. He's afraid to acknowledge how he's feeling, even though that's exactly what he needs to do, because he knows in his heart of hearts that like Avar is the thing that keeps him coming back to the light. Like, she inspires him.
Yeah, this is definitely an Avar centric or Avar minded story, I think, even more than Elzar. But yeah, Elzar, he lives in fear just a little bit, and he's got to crack that shell in order to get what he wants. Avar's at a point where she's like, I've been away, we've said no a lot, I've rejected you a lot, and now I'm saying, you know what? Fuck that. I need to acknowledge this right here, right now, or else. But yeah, I think their comfortability with each other. There's also this like really beautiful, interesting, rather unspoken thing. Speaking of chapter 20 of Stellan, in the mix, and also in chapter 1, you know, when she goes and buys 3 of the nut buns, and she was so overwhelmed when she was in the shop that she just did her usual order and didn't correct it. And so the memory of Stellan throughout this story is still really present for Avar and Elzar, which I think is great and beautiful. But also it does continue questions of like the 3 of them as, for lack of a better word, like a throuple, yes or no. And like what I love about this story is like it doesn't say yes or no to that. It allows readers to come to their own conclusions because it's clear that they both loved him too. And that he loved them back. And what kind of love that was like is left to the in between the lines, the ambiguity of the past, right? But I love that he's so present with the 3 gems, with the 3 nut buns, with them talking about him and them missing him. Yeah, I think the diadem specifically was a moment where I was just like, I will cry right here and right now.
And I think it's important too for them to acknowledge that absence. And I'm glad that they do repeatedly. I will say on the throuple front, the kind of closest we get to it is later in the book. There's this moment where Elzar is recalling their past and he says, or he thinks, quote, the thought led immediately to memories of the 2 of them giggling with Stellan, flirting with each other, and at him, his ears pink when he wouldn't flirt back. So there's definitely some throuple energy there of like potentially Stellan and Elzar flirting with each other and sort of this like young, doughy-eyed love that each of them had for each other. And that's what brought them so close. And I think in some respect, the loss of Stellan maybe is what the loss of Stellan and the absence from one another is what is driving them back together so ferociously, because who knows what could happen, right? Like, I think at one point when they're jumping to hyperspace, Elzar thinks if those dark, fathomless eyes had to be the last thing he ever saw alive, he was all right with that. And so it's like, I will die happy if I have her next to me. And think about Elzar watching Starlight Beacon crash into the ocean, and Stellan is inside of that ship, and now he's in the Irem Ocean, in the wreckage. And the thought of that just breaks their hearts. So it's like, as long as we can be here next to each other, holding each other's hands, quite literally in the face of fear, later in the chapters, like that to them is what matters the most. And I was so happy to finally get that confession of love. Let's talk about chapter 36, because that's the chapter.
Can we still talk about chapter 20 though?
Yes,
I'm still
absolutely.
not over the diadem.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, because we will talk about the confession of love or else. But the 3 gems put together in the center, and Stellan is the brains. Avar, she goes, of course, I'm the brawn. Go Queen Girly, go.
Yes.
And Elzar, you're the heart. You're the heart of this trio. And then she puts the diadem on him, on his forehead, and they have that moment. And I was like,
she says, where is my Elzar?
He's the center gem. He's the heart. I don't like, I'll cry.
By the way, I'm so glad Tessa didn't jump right to the kiss in a lot of these scenes. Like she really like gave us so many crumbs to say, you're going to have to wait.
Yes, but it's the comfortability of all these scenes where you're not going, they should have kissed. It's like, oh, that was so beautiful and warm and wonderful. And you can tell these people love each other so much.
Very, very tender.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. But they also say they're Stellan at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I just see, maybe we should do the non-audio. This is how the book made me feel, because like it would just be like a picture of a puddle, and it'd be like, that's me, a puddle on the ground. But yeah, Stellan and Elzar gave Avar her first diadem when she was knighted. Which
cry emoji.
Can we just talk about how they commissioned this beautiful piece of jewelry for her as like as young adults? Like, oh, they loved her bad. They loved her bad.
The more I think about this trio, the more I think this is just challengers in Star Wars. I love too that like on the topic of Stellan, they're talking about the ways that they describe the Force, and Avar's like, you see it as an ocean, I see it as a song, Stellan saw it as a galaxy. Like we're all basically, it's all the Force. We're just describing the same thing, but in different ways. Just because your metaphor is different doesn't mean it's less effective. And I love that Avar brings that up as well, as like they're kind of all, again, like tapped in and connected by this one thing, despite their differences in how they see it. And just because, Elzar, I think that's a point to Elzar needs to hear is like, he thinks he's trying to live in Stellan's shadow. He's just doing it differently. He'll never be Stellan.
That was one of the great moments, I think, of the whole being offered the seat on the council, was when the council says to him, we aren't offering you Stellan's seat. We're offering you your seat if you want it. We don't replace on the council, we add. And I thought that was like a really nice and thoughtful thing, because, it's a little bit like the Supreme Court in the sense that like the only time that you're really going to ask for a new person is like if somebody retires, which are they really going to retire, or if they die, right? And either way, you're having to replace somebody who was a titan of sorts. And I imagine that's very stressful, especially when that is your beloved, lost friend, lover, whoever, like your person, especially as somebody who is very self-conscious and somebody who struggles a lot. So I really liked that moment. And I think that the whole council bit too, which you were talking talking a bit about earlier, is a beautiful kind of way for Elzar to start accepting his own agency, because he does go to Yoda and is like, can I kiss my girlfriend at one point in this book? But he also goes to them to be like, I'm going to go with Avar, or can I go with Avar across the storm wall and go on this mission with her? And then he meets up with one of the council members outside of there, and they're like, yeah, of course you can go. And this doesn't have to be your answer either. And he's like, oh, I was about to defend myself and then ask, but I didn't even have to do that. You're just, okay, I can do that. Interesting. So I thought that to be valuable for him. And also when one of the masters says, you revere your mistake, and he's like, revere my mistake? Why would you say that? But then also he thinks about it. He does spend a lot of time. He puts a lot of his energies into his mistakes, and that's what makes him so fearful, is because he does revere his mistakes. But circling back to the metaphors, I just want to read this from Avar. First, a rhythm, a tide is part of a song, and there's a pattern to the movements of the stars. It's predictable, grand, like music. This rhythm, a heartbeat. You call the Force an ocean. I call it a song. Stella calls it a galaxy, but it's all the Force. We're all describing the same thing. But I love that she puts both Stellan and Elzar's views of the Force and contextualizes it against her own. Because it's like, it's saying, yes, we're all describing the Force, but she's also saying that like yours is mine. These aren't any different from one another. Yeah. So a rhythm, a tide is part of a song. The movements of the stars is predictable and grand like music. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful stuff. And I think, again, like just these like tender moments of it's not lust. They're not just smacking lips and making out. Like we build to that through these emotional conversations.
I'm also not here to downplay my enjoyment of lust. Let us be so clear.
No, but I'm saying like we earn it. Like we earn it in this book, like through these conversations, through these heart to hearts, like through these tough conversations that they have, and dealing with loss and that absence of Stellan, and realizing that they need each other and they never want to be apart from one another ever again. And that feels right.
I have a question for you. Did you immediately, like as of chapter 1, feel like the warmth between these two?
Yeah.
Like I don't know how you read, but like sometimes I can just go, That's not a very good audio cue, but I'm also like squiggling my hands. Like,
well, yeah. I mean, chapter 1 was basically just a fun sleepover between the two of them, right? And like they're drinking wine on the floor and they're eating like a pretzel, and
they woke up on
bun.
they woke up in a heap on the floor. Ruggy groggy and groggy. What did I write? Groggy and tear stained. They cried and cuddled all night. I wrote, yeah, okay, I'm feeling super normal about this. Great note from Sarah. Tessa, ma'am, I know exactly what you are doing is what I also wrote. But yeah, their story is just so beautiful. And I guess unless you have anything else to say about anything that leads up to chapter 36, now we may talk about the love confession.
Yeah, so this chapter, this is after the Battle of Naboo, right? I believe this is after they kind of experience the Nameless, and we'll get to that at some point. But this chapter, I transcribed so much of it because
it's like an entire page of your notes, and like your notes are in 10-point font.
Yeah. But I think this is kind of the moment where it's like we can't mince words any further. We can't hide from what we're feeling. And Elzar is being extremely vulnerable to talk about. He needs to keep going back to the light, and he understands the dark comes with the light, but like he needs to like always find that light no matter what. Avar is telling him that like he inspires her, he makes her better. There's this kind of like push and pull between them, and she tells him like your problem is that you don't have an anchor, like something that keeps forcing you to focus on the light. And when you asked me to be your anchor, I wasn't ready. And I think that's what drove Avar away. She's like, I feel like I can't handle all of this. Like I had this responsibility. I failed. I chased the Hutts. Stellan took my place on Starlight. He died in my place as the Marshal. I can't take on more responsibility. I can't be your anchor. That's just too much to ask of me. Goodbye. Right. And now she's back and he's struggling and she's ready. She's ready to be that anchor.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about Elzar talking about where he's at with this is that, you said that the darkness comes with the light, but there's this moment where he says the edge is where he does his best work. And that makes me think of my favorite, of course. Do you know where I'm going with this? My favorite quote about the Force. It's Come Back Fetus. It's Come Back Fetus. Come back Fetus, where are you? Come back, King. But dividing the dark from the light, that in itself is an act of violence. So the edge where being where that, wow, words are really hard. The edge being where he does his best work is, to me, a really natural position to be in, right? Like acknowledging all the sides of himself, acknowledging where it can go right and it can go wrong, and tapping into all of those things is where he's most effective, I think is really thoughtful and interesting. And I'm glad that it's being described like this for Elzar. But then, Avar responding to that saying it is, knowing that about you inspires me, El. Also, side note, nickname El, I cry. It makes me better. You thrive when you can push and drag us with you to new places. You find the light in those edges. Your problem has been pushing without the right anchor, without something that keeps you focused on the light so that when you fall over an edge, it's the light you leap to first. And that's the point where you said, when you asked me to be your anchor, I wasn't ready at that point. But like, I love how that is described so much. Your problem is you need an anchor to the light. You can go any place. You can be tempted to the dark. You can be tempted to the light. But to continue to kind of lean on the right side of things, you got to have reasons to. And I
think what's sort of the critical part of this conversation is the admission of love. And again, Elzar's scared because he's worried if he gives into desire, it will make it even harder to focus on the light from the darkness.
I want this. I want you. I always have. I don't think I've known you without wanting you, Avar. I'm going to fling myself out this window screaming.
But he's basically like, I'm afraid of what I might do. This is why we, the Jedi, avoid attachments. I'm a case study for it, which, Elzar, you're so real for saying that. That's sort of like a meta quote there. in some ways.
Right.
Like, he doesn't know he's a case study within the realm of the Star Wars franchise, but he's saying it here. That was like a fourth wall break moment for me.
He's
Of
like winking at the camera. I'm the case study for it.
yeah, basically that was his Deadpool, look at the camera moment.
Right.
But this is where I think one of the best monologues in this book comes from is Avar's admission that she loves him, and she says, quote, "I've struggled with it too. Thought it was dangerous, selfish, something to be carved out. That's a common interpretation of what we're taught. But that's also too easy of an answer. That love is an attachment, that it's selfish, possessive. It isn't. I was wrong. Those things are real and dangerous to Jedi, to anyone, but they aren't love. In my worst moments, I've loved you. In my greatest grief and failure, I've still loved you. And it didn't turn me down the wrong path. It's what got me back onto my feet. I stood up and I reached back, loved back. People, the Force, watched hope spread and beings all over the galaxy keep fighting, keep trying. That's love. That's the purest form of light. How can a sliver of it here between us be wrong?" So let's stop there for a second. There's a second part to this, but let's stop there for a minute. When you read that, what was your initial gut reaction to that?
Giggling, screaming, kicking my feet. Okay. Losing my mind, coming apart at the seams, crying. I don't know. I don't know. This is so, it's so revelatory for her to be saying this for herself, for Elzar, but also I think as a Star Wars reader. And we've been talking a lot about attachment throughout the High Republic. There have been these key conversations among characters, especially young characters, about what attachment means and like, how do I have a crush without attachment? How do I have, grief without attachment? How do I go through the world without attachment? And the answer is like, we're doing this dividing that is harming our understanding of our own emotion and harming our understanding of the world around us. And Avar saying, in my worst moments, I've loved you. And that is what propels me forward. That's what brings me back, is my love for you. And that can't be wrong because it's led me back to the right path more than once. And I love that she's coming to terms throughout this book of like, oh, this feeling isn't wrong. This feeling isn't wrong. This is super right. I've never felt more right in my life about this, about him, about where we are. And I'm trusting my instincts because it brings me closer to the light. And I just, love being the purest form of light. That it's so one lone candle can ignite the stars. It's so me crying at 2 a.m. Going, I love Star Wars so much. It's such a great moment. It's such a great moment. And that final question of how can this sliver of it here between us be wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Why deny this? How could it be wrong when this is good?
And I love to, I think one huge thing here too is like her unraveling this sort of taught avoidance of love and attachment.
Right.
She's saying
right, yeah.
that to say that like love is possessiveness or love is selfishness or that love is attachment is wrong. That's too easy of an answer. Those things are real and dangerous, but they're not love. She's separating those things out. It's like you can love somebody, but it doesn't mean you're selfish. It doesn't mean you're possessive. Being possessive, being selfish is a character quality. It is a trait. Somebody that is possessive is going to have possessive love, but somebody that's not possessive is going to have love absence of possessiveness. Anakin was somebody who had possessiveness, had selfishness because he was the chosen one, right? Like he knows that's who he is. So he wants to grow power. He's a little selfish in that regard. And he has attachment because he was stripped away from his mom, like at the age of 9 or 10, right? So it's like naturally he's going to have a little bit of selfish desire because he feels like this thing that he did love was taken away from him. So he's naturally going to gravitate towards collecting emotion and things that he loves and holding on to those for his dear life.
Mm-hmm.
But not every form of love is attachment. Not every form of love is possessiveness. And I love her just making that differentiating thing here of like those things they're not mutually, or they are mutually exclusive of one another, if I'm saying that right. Like they don't have to be one and the same.
Right. It's like all squares, all squares
Oh no.
are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you were gonna start with the rectangle goes in the square hole.
No. That's one of my favorite videos on the internet, but no. It's a great thing to be parsed out here because the Jedi do, which is like peace and justice in the galaxy, helping other people, right? Like fundamentally, those are caring actions, it's caring acts, and that care is love. We wouldn't do it if we didn't care for other people, if we didn't see the light in other people, if we didn't acknowledge and accept their, humanity. And that in itself is love. So yeah, I think this is great. Keep going with this quote.
Yeah. I mean, imagine a world without love and caring. We see what happens when those things are very absent. Avar continues, quote, "I love you so much, and it's not a hindrance. Attachment, possessiveness, those are hindrances because they limit a Jedi's potential. They make the galaxy smaller. But love is limitless, Elzar. Just like the Force itself is limitless. There's no end to it. If there was an end to the Force, to love, to hope, don't you think we'd have found it in the last few years? But we're black holes for love, unending notes and bottomless seas. We make the galaxy bigger with love, with the Force bursting inside of us. I love you. It's part of me forever, the way the Force and the light are part of me forever. Nothing, not distance or grief or death, could end it. That's all I needed to say." And oh my God, that first off, like, not distance or grief or death could end it. When you think of the concept of love, it is insane. It is an insane concept because you feel love for people who are gone. Like when somebody dies in your life, you still feel love for that person. Death can't end that love. Grief can't end that love. You will always feel it no matter what. And that, the fact that we have this unexplainable feeling that we can feel and perceive as humans, distance and grief and death can't get rid of it. That's incredible. I just have to say that for a second. It's wild. And it makes me think of that Interstellar quote from Anne Hathaway where she's just like, this is just a concept that we can't explain. Like love is also not bound to anything. It's just
And it's also the beautiful quote from, of all things, WandaVision. What is grief if not love persevering? And that's something we see with Stellan and their view of Stellan. They grieve him because they love him, and he's that love. The thing with love is like it is present. Love is present tense. Even if your relationship with somebody has ended, love can go on, even if it feels a little illogical. Like that person isn't in my life anymore for X, Y, or Z reason, but they made up such an important part of my life while they were here, and that love goes on, and it feels very present for the person who's experiencing it. And I think that's what makes it the purest form of light, because it is so, love is a present feeling.
Mm-hmm.
There is, yes, I loved you in the past tense, and maybe you don't actively feel love for that person, but love as a feeling is still present tense. I don't know how to explain this well, but do you know what I'm saying by saying that like love is a present tense feeling?
Yeah, no, totally. But like, I'm gonna bring this Interstellar quote up again, which I've brought up before. This is from Anne Hathaway's character. She says, "Maybe it's some evidence, some artifact of a higher dimension that we can't consciously perceive. I'm drawn across the universe to someone I haven't seen in a decade who I know is probably dead. Love is the one thing we're capable of perceiving that transcends dimensions of time and space. Maybe we should trust that even if we can't understand it." I think the reality is we don't understand love. The moment you love somebody, you just know it all of a sudden. It's not like this thing that we consciously, it's like a subconscious, I don't know. It's so hard to explain love, and I'm just probably like way over exaggerating this point now, but like I just love this idea from from Avar, that it's like, it is boundless, it is infinite, there's no limit to it, it is just always there all the time. And you saying it's a present feeling, it's like a present feeling baked in the past of who we've known and who's come across in our who we've come across in our lives, but it's also present in the fact of reflecting on what could be in the future, because we know that we love somebody and we want to spend our lives with them, and we are going to experience many years with them. And so we are feeling love now. We're feeling love from our memories. We're feeling love for what could be in the future. And that's why it's limitless. It's like, ooh, love.
I've got another quote from you. I've got another quote for you. This one's from Les Miserables. Les Miserables. And it comes towards the end. To love another person is to see the face of God. And I think that it's beautifully sung. It's a whole moment. But I think that it really kind of explains, like, to love another person is this pure form of existence. It allows you to, when you love somebody, you trust them. When you, love somebody, you see goodness and lightness in them. And yeah, I don't know. I just think that I like, let's take a step back and just hand it to Tessa for this scene, because it's so beautiful and it's so earned with these characters. They deserve to talk about their feelings. They deserve to come to terms with one another and where they are, and like embrace that. And this whole monologue from Avar is so effortless, but also so meticulously drawn. You know, and that's the mark of I think a great moment. Is, I mean, like, obviously a lot of effort went into writing this, making sure that it was perfect and good. I have no doubt, but it feels so effortless for these characters to be talking like this and to be accepting one another like this. Well, not, I mean, they smooch and then he runs. It's a whole thing. And
I think an important footnote too, like, love does not have to be romantic love, as we're talking about this too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I don't know. I just think of those things, like, if we love and we care for one another, like, good things happen. And I want to jump to, Elzar takes all this from Avar and he sort of compartmentalizes it. And goes to Yoda, and they have this conversation in the in the aftermath of Elzar just running away, and he's just like, I can't right now. I'm sorry, Avar. And he's trying to figure it all out. He's like, Master Yoda, is it possible to be free of attachment, to be pure in the Force, but also to love an individual? And Yoda says, depends on what is meant by love. I believe some beings think love is a connection. Love is recognizing you and me and the whole galaxy. To name a thing is to love it. Some teachings say. Others that love is vulnerability or a natural bodily need. What the real answer is, I do not know. But if you find the answer for yourself and it opens the Force to you more widely, brings you closer to the light, then wrong you cannot be. I was like, oh my God, Yoda, tell me about your love history, man. He's loved. And even Elzar's like, Master Yoda, have you found an answer for yourself? Do you love? And Yoda says, always. And I like to hear Master Yoda say he always loves is incredible, because the Jedi are meant to not love, but Yoda's like, I always love. What do you mean? What do you make of Yoda's answer to Elzar there?
I wrote 3 stars around this, and I wrote, Yoda gives solidly good advice! ! Yeah, this was such a funny moment, because you're like, he's going to Yoda. Oh my Lord. He's going to talk to Yoda about his love life, but also Yoda really has something to say here that is so valid and right. And also it's different. I like how he acknowledges that it's different for different people. Yoda, what happens, bro? We give Anakin some pretty bad advice later on.
Dude, Yoda becomes so jaded. Like, he's just like, I'm done giving people advice.
Yeah, I love that. Wow, I love LOL, take a shot. Don't, you're gonna die if you take a shot every time we say love in this episode. But I like that he acknowledges that he wants to be with Avar during his time in the Living Force. Like, I want to be with her here now. And also that, her declaration has allowed him to see love in others. Like, it just kind of opens a new world for him. And then Elzar saying to live is to choose. You have to choose the light. Like, this book is ultimately about temptation to the light. And to live is to choose what path you're going to take. And I thought that was delicious. So good.
Yeah, and then Yoda responds to that. And if you choose in a moment a way that overwhelms you, and then the next moment, the next day, you choose again.
Right.
Just keep making a new choice. Every day is a new day. And yeah, I thought this conversation between the two of them, Yoda even bringing up like, hey, do you think your parents loved you less because they sent you to be a Jedi? It's like, no. Elzar says they let me go. They loved me and they let me pass through their lives, through their love. They didn't hold on to me even if they ached to, right? Love is letting go. Attachment doesn't allow you to let go. And that's Anakin's problem. He doesn't know how to let go of Padme and let her flow through his life. And, to some extent, like, I think Yoda, when he tells Anakin, let go of everything you fear to lose, I think on the surface, that sounds dismissive. And it sounds like Yoda does not care about Anakin. But like what he's really telling Anakin is actually kind of true and like valid advice. He's like, you need to just like let go. You need to separate yourself from your possessiveness of Padme. Like you need to separate those two things.
Anakin was doing some concealment about what was really going on.
Right.
And Yoda was not giving the most appropriately worded advice for that moment for Anakin. Because it doesn't really he hears that advice and he's like, I don't know. But it's because Yoda doesn't have all the info. But there's this quote on page 323, which says, loving Stellan had certainly never done anything but make the two of them better. And if we're denying our love for Stellan, or if we're saying that was wrong, then who are we?
Well, speaking of loving, let's talk about chapter 53.
Man, we're just,
which I think is
I say, oh wow, we're really just flying through it. We're an hour and 15 minutes of this episode. So what are we talking about flying through it? We've been yapping about them for like an hour.
In all fairness, they're on the cover, so this is probably where we're going to spend most of our conversation.
No, but I'm just surprised we're not going even slower through this conversation.
I know.
I'm like, wow, there's so much to talk about. We're flying through this, and it's like, no, guys, you've been talking about them for an hour.
Chapter 53 is where the magic happens. One might say they explode with love in this chapter. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So let's talk about it. Elzar, he tells Avar, you balance me. Your song does. It can shape my tides, the ocean, or echo through it. I don't have the exact words, but I know it. I feel it. Man, he loves getting his tides shaped. I'll tell you that. He gets a lot of his tides shaped in this chapter.
Oh my God.
Let me have this moment. It's so good. They finally did a thing with each other. A thing.
I'm happy for them. I have no notes. I'm delighted for them, but you could say they exploded with love makes me actually want to open up my window and go, like gotta go.
I mean, that happened. What happened.
Yeah. And I support them. I'm happy for them. I'm thrilled for them. Like incredibly, incredibly so.
But there's this thought, as they're sort of giving themselves over to each other, Elzar is thinking, at first I thought it's to make up for Stellan being gone. But that isn't how the Force works. It doesn't replace or exchange. It flows. It fills. So maybe we're needed like this together. The Force needs something from us. Of course it does. But maybe it needs us together for it. And it sort of feels like this divine intervention by the Force to say, all of this, what's happening between you two is not because Stellan is gone. You're not trying to fill in a void or a gap. It's just you are needed here and now for a purpose, and you're stronger together, and you need to be together in order to whatever is about to happen. You two need to be a force to be reckoned with. You need to be united by love, not denying those feelings. If you can't accept the love between you, if you can't give yourselves over to each other in the name of love, you're not ready to take on what's next. And I think a lot of that has to do with overcoming fear and defeating the nameless. The Force is drawing these two people together because love conquers fear.
Sorry, I tuned all of that out. I was just reading this chapter.
Great.
While you were talking, so
Thanks.
I have no idea what you said. I'm kidding. I mean, I was reading it, but I was also listening. And you were talking about the fear. Hey, I remembered some things while I was reading while I was listening to you and reading at the same time. You mentioned the fear, and I just want to point to 366. It says, she turned her face and kissed him deeply and lazily. Elzar's arms tightened around her. He kissed her back, tentatively enough she knew he was still overthinking it. It made her smile into his lips. Are you laughing at me? He murmured. A little bit. And she knows him so well that in this moment, she knows exactly where he's still going wrong, and what's holding him back. And she will make fun of him just a tiny little bit because he deserves it. And I thought that was so gentle, but also why they're so important that they're together like this, because they know each other like this. And it allows them to move past. If they give themselves over to each other, you know, literally, but also mentally and like emotionally, they're stronger together because they know each other well enough to balance one another and to balance the tendencies that the negative tendencies that they may have. And I think that's great.
And to bring up the great Matthew Stover, giving themselves over to each other in a loving manner. You know, the end of the Rots novelization, and it says, one lone candle is enough to hold it, the darkness, back. Love is more than a candle. Love can ignite the stars, right? And so if love can ignite the stars and the stars are infinite, then love is infinite, you know, the transitive property right there. So it's like,
we did the transitive property. We figured it out.
The transitive property of the Rots novelization. But it's so good. And I think
you
it's
could say that
acceptance.
line is the key to all of this, perhaps.
Totally. But I think like chapter 3 is finally this acceptance that like love will make us stronger. And we know that. We're confident in that. And so now we're going to give ourselves over to it. And, you know, a little bit of straddling happens, a little bit of taking off some clothes, and, you know, Elzar Man's pants come off, one might say. And, Avar says, okay, do you know what Jedi teach about choosing the light? And Elzar says, remind me. And then Avar says, it takes practice. And Elzar says, practice. I like practice. And, ooh.
Tessa, I love you so
Tessa,
much.
Thank you.
I love you so much.
Thank you, Tessa.
Yeah. I also just need to state it for the record publicly, listeners. Where's this line? Where's the line? Avar leaned over him and cupped his face. He held her hips, hands skimming down her strong thighs. Okay, I'm out. I'm out. Okay, I'm out. I gotta go. I gotta leave. I'm losing my mind.
I have a concussion.
Normal. I'm not normal about that little tiny paragraph specifically. Firstly, I'm okay. Lastly, strong thighs. Okay, strong. I love women. Okay, bye.
I love women and strong thighs. Yes.
Well. That has been established on this podcast.
Have we had a female Wookiee Jedi? I feel like you'll just fall over. All of our Wookiee Jedi have been men.
Where are the girl Wookiees?
Where are they at? We have Kalnaka, we have Bur Yaga, we have Arkoff.
I want to make it clear, I'm not a furry.
To be very clear,
I love no hate for the furries. But I'm just not a furry. I just love a powerful, strong thigh. And I love that this goes into Avar being like, well, I'm of course the brawn. Like she's like, I am strong girl, good harvest. You know, I appreciate that. I love that. And I also just love this for Elzar. Appreciate the thighs, you know, like it worked for me. That sentence worked for me. I was really happy about that. Made me really happy. I smiled. I was giggling, kicking my feet, you know, like I'm out here living my best life. Settling her hands on his stomach. Yeah. Tummy. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. That's all I have to say. All right. We can move on now.
But yes, chapter 53, one of my favorites. I think it was the moment you and I have been waiting for since 2021, like as we've been saying.
Yeah, chapter 23, Light of the Jedi. I've been waiting.
Just love a little bit 11, you know what I mean? But I think, you know, aside from sort of like, yay, horny Star Wars, good. I think one of the most important reasons for this chapter is that acceptance. And it is the recognition that love makes us stronger. And that's exactly what they needed for the end of this book when they face off against the Nameless on, I think it was Vixtasif or something, whatever that last planet is. But let's rewind a bit first before we talk about the Nameless. And I could say too, from here on out, I think the rest of this episode is going to be egg talk because Nameless, Blight, Fear, all of those things are kind of contained within egg talk. And there's like, we even mapped it out when we were planning this episode. There's like, it was like egg talk is a big bubble. And then there's all these like little sub bubbles within the egg talk bubble because it's just
we
like
made a very large Venn diagram of this book for ourselves.
Yeah. And we'll get to the Blight and kind of the larger scope of the story and the end game and how the Blight fits into that. Because I think end game equals Blight, equals a Nameless. But like, let's talk about the actual Nameless themselves, the beings that our Jedi confront. And we have to start with Bur-Yaga, who is important to the Blight. But on Naboo, when this big battle is happening, which by the way, so cool that we got to have a battle on Naboo in the High Republic.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. But the Nameless show up and it spells trouble for our Jedi. But I think what they learn from this fight is very critical for the end of this book, which is like, we don't necessarily need to defeat the Nameless through our swords, but through our hearts and maybe through our minds. And Burry sort of has this curiosity when he is overcome by the effects of the Nameless to he's like, everything about the Nameless makes you want to run and get out of the way. But like Burry's sort of reaching towards it. Burry is somebody who likes to help. He is an empathetic Wookiee. And it says here, Burry needed to help. He had what the being needed. He should give it. Giving what Burry did, what he wanted, who he was. He should surrender because he was here and he could. The Force was with him. He could offer it. And it's at this point that he like kills a Nameless, or somebody kills a Nameless. He is like starting to get so overcome with fear. And he's almost taking the fear from Bell and from Vernestra and sort of funneling it into him. Something's going on. Something we might have just uncovered about our fight against the Nameless.
I think what's really important to that is that Bur-Yaga could see them.
Yeah.
Like sort of clearly, right? And he feels that the Nameless were off center and out of alignment in the Force. And that engenders a bit of sympathy for him because he recognizes what they're facing. Although, surrendering to them would mean feeding them, which would mean death, which is, what everybody else has done. He recognizes that there's something distinctly wrong about their beingness here.
Yeah, and even after they kill this single Nameless, he feels a twinge of sympathy. It says
exactly,
his insides twist. He didn't want to care about these monsters, but dead like this, empty sacks of bones and ragged fur, he couldn't help it. They looked used, abandoned. Burry swallowed a choked groan. This whole scene is so fascinating because when we've talked about like the Nameless and their beings who have never done anything wrong in their entire life, we've been often saying like, who's the key to all of this? And I think Burry is a huge key to all of this because I think like this scene's important because he discovers how we actually fight the Nameless. It's there's sort of these like sad, pathetic things. They look just like they need to be helped, or maybe there's something that they can be offered. And Burry kind of wants to give that because he is a giver. And they're having this debrief later on when he tells them it wasn't really clarity, but he had heard screaming of all of his friends. And it says, quote, he used the panic for the next part. Burry couldn't help closing his eyes, feeling an echo of it again as he reminded them that he knows emotions well, and he used it. The fear, his own, Bell's, everyone's, gave him direction, and he guessed where the creature was by the strength of the fear. Then he threw his lightsaber. And Vernestra asked, do you think that's what it takes? Empathy? And then Master Kisaka says, not too much, I hope. And then Yoda's like, testing this possibility is not an option. Yoda, you're wrong. It is empathy. That's how we defeat the Nameless. What do you mean?
Yeah, Burry even says like, you said he didn't want to care about this monsters, but he couldn't help it. They looked used, abandoned. You know, he says like their awful twisted bodies felt out of place, not quite wrong, but although as if they didn't fit in with the rest of the force. You know, used, abandoned. They seemed so pathetic now. Yoda, it's right there. It's right there. They're not our enemy. They're uwu babies, never done anything wrong in their lives. They don't want to be here. Yoda, listen to me. Yoda, listener of the podcast, fictional character Yoda. Don't do this.
Truly, like I feel like the answer is dangling right in front of them like a carrot and they're not quite getting it. But like Vernestra kind of says it, like empathy, is that what it actually takes? And I think that's why it's just so important that Burryaga is kind of the first Jedi to have maybe an answer or a version of the answer that he can present to the council to say, like, I used panic. I used fear. Like, what do you make of the fact that Burry was sort of able to overcome by using emotions? Whereas, like, the Jedi Code is there is no emotion, there is peace, but maybe emotion is exactly what you need to overcome fear. Because we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
Like, you need to name your emotions to understand them. But if you don't use emotions, then you never understand them. You don't make sense of them.
Yes. And loving is an emotion, is it not? At Elzar and Avar. You know, and Burry being an empath, is that not antithetical then to the Jedi at all? No, he's actually a great boon to the Jedi because he understands, because being a Jedi is being caring, you know, and that's what Burry is, an empath, someone who can understand the emotions, who can feel, who can be a presence when somebody's in need of a presence.
But I think this is exactly like going to now like the last couple of chapters on Vixosif 1, when it's Burry and Avar and Elzar and they're facing off against the Nameless, and Burry is kind of recalling that moment on Naboo that we just talked about, where he's like, I can do it again. I can use my empathy and pinpoint the fear and fight it. You know, let that fear flow through me and consume me, and then make his fear into a fighting chance, it says here. And something about the brightness of Avar's fear let him focus on passing it along. So it's like this pinpointed focus on fear, acknowledging that fear is a thing that we should hone in on. And even earlier in Naboo, there's a moment where Avar says she didn't want her fellows to be afraid or to give into that fear, but to ignore it was arrogance. And that was one of the fastest roads to the dark side and defeat.
And to live, as Elzar says, to live is to choose, and to choose what we acknowledge and what we focus on. And if we ignore it, then that is a wrong choice.
Why do you think the ignorance of fear leads to the dark side?
It's the same reason the Nameless are called the Nameless, right? Like it's not wanting to put value to that emotion, not wanting to give that emotion space, because there's a sense that if we give it space, we will give into it, as opposed to acknowledge it, learn from it, etc., etc. The ignorance of fear is a lack of understanding of it, right? Like a lack of knowing yourself in that way. You have to know what you fear in order to move past the fear.
Yeah, and it's like why I asked that question, because Avar phrasing it that way, to ignore it is arrogance, and that leads to the dark side. Whereas like we've been taught, no, feeling fear leads to anger, leads to hate, leads to suffering. And so it feels like those two things are at conflict with one another.
They're actually best buddies.
And it's so interesting because Yoda is saying, no, to feel fear leads to the dark side. And here Avar is saying, no, to ignore fear leads to the dark side. And I think she's right.
These codes are best friends because they're both doing the work of being reductive. Let's throw it all away. Let's make this thing called a Grey Jedi. I'm kidding. No, but like there is no emotion. There is peace. And then anger leads to, or fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate, whatever. Both of them are saying this is the only way, right? Like if you feel this one thing, you go down this path. And if you feel no things, that is the right thing, instead of like feeling and understanding and making a choice, right? Feeling, understanding, and making a choice. Neither of the Jedi code nor the Sith code like acknowledge the factor of genuine understanding and choice in that understanding.
And it's exactly the Jedi's downfall. You know, I think the whole point of
George Lucas, why would you do this to us?
like the whole point of the High Republic is what do the Jedi fear?
Right.
And yeah, to look at fear and own it and let it pass through you is sort of what does Luke say? Facing fear is the greatest destiny, is like the destiny of the Jedi. Luke is a character in the sequels who knows why the Jedi fell from the height of their power. He has studied it. I feel like him saying that to Rey is a lesson he took away from the prequel Jedi. Well, why did the Jedi fall? It's because they lost sight of the fact that no, like fear is like conquering fear is the destiny of a Jedi. But to conquer fear, you have to know it, you have to name it, you have to see it, you have to own it. But the Jedi of the prequels are saying, no, don't own fear, don't feel fear at all, because that's bad. And so here in this the ending of this book, it's totally a conquest of fear. It is like this is Avar and Elzar's destiny. It's to conquer fear in this moment.
You know, we are relitigating this line from the Rise of Skywalker for me all the fucking time, and I'm grateful for it. But like, wow.
It says here, chapter 59, use the fear together. That is it.
Yes.
But, you know, Burry, a lot of times in this book, is feeling like it's all up to him. But there are a couple of points where he realizes, like, no, we have to actually do this together. If we don't do this together, we're going to fail. And it's like when the great disaster happened, Avar was the conductor of the Song of the Force. All of the Jedi across the galaxy in unison accepted her song and sung with it. And they stopped the great disaster from happening. And it's exactly what they're going to have to do again. That's the trials of the Jedi. It's all of them saying, no, let's all use our fear as one. And we can overcome this.
Which is a terrifying ask, right? Like, it's a really difficult ask to be like, will you channel your fear for me? Will you channel your fear with me? And trust that we will get through this together in this particular way. You know, and put your trust in the lightness despite tapping into your fear.
Yeah.
I think that I'm looking at chapter 59, my notes, fusing the fear together, but as the fear fades, right? As the fear fades, Vernestra can clearly see the nameless. You know, I think that that's a really interesting thing here. Like, we're using our fear together to pinpoint where they are, to figure out what they, you know, how to go after them or whatever. But when Burry sees one dead, he realizes how out of place in the Force they are. He realizes how wrong this whole situation feels. And then when Vernestra sees them, sees that they're emaciated, sees that they're dead, you know, sees that there's something wrong in this too. And, you know, once we get past the fear, once the fear subsides, we see that maybe the fear, while they're creating the fear in a way, right? Like, the fear is the feeling that the Jedi feel around them because that's kind of what they're placing in their minds, this sort of all-consuming fear. Once you move past the fear, you realize that maybe that was the wrong assessment to be, the wrong feeling to be feeling, because these creatures are not after you in a malicious sort of way, but more like in a nom nom hungry sort of way.
Right.
Because I'm not being fed by the Nile. Marchion Ro is bad.
Yeah, well, fear is a reaction to the unknown. And then once you know the unknown, then it's not scary anymore.
Yes. Then, you know, it's time to start calling the nameless the Shrieker-Eye. Because that is a name. The nameless is a name, but the nameless is also the absence of a name.
Mm-hmm.
And because we've chosen the Jedi being, I'm inserting myself into the Jedi for this, because we've chosen to name them as the nameless, we are putting fear in ourselves because there is a lack of understanding of what they actually are. Anyway,
totally.
This is what we've been saying this whole time. This is the central point of Egg Talk. This is our whole thing.
But this whole scene is incredible. You have Elzar, who kind of feels his terror tipping into rage, into hate. It was right there, to the power to destroy the nameless first if he chose. And then Avar squeezes his hand And it's like all of that thought of tipping into rage and hate goes away.
Right.
Because he's reminded, hey, love is the answer here, right? And we've talked about this a lot, is like, what do you do when you're faced with fear? And we've seen in previous books where when facing the nameless, those effects of the nameless go away if you tip into rage and hate. But there's also the other choice that you can make, which is to not hate or to not be rageful. And it's to look at the fear and feel love. Remember the things around you that you love, and that tips you more towards the light, having that anchor. And I think like in our own lives, when we become our worst selves, like what brings us back to our truest, best version of ourselves? It's love. It's remembering the people around us. It's the people that keep us anchored in our lives, you know? And Avar is kind of pulling the fear from Buri and from Elzar like into herself instead of directing it. And this is when Elzar is sort of allowing more room within his mind for the light. It says, quote, "He was the center of the tide. The power was immense, more than him, beyond him, and he dragged through him, making himself a river to channel all of that strength. The force was boundless, unlimited, especially with Avar at his side. Time and self were slippery, but the force was all. He stood directly in front of the nameless. One whirling blue eye stared back at him, growing larger and larger until it fit all over Elzar's vision. It screamed. Then it surged towards him. Elzar screamed back at it, driving his lightsaber into its flank." And so he's able to have this moment where he sees just enough to fight back because that fear is channeling off of him. Meanwhile, Avar is there. You know, she is sort of taking all of that fear. It's overwhelming for her. She says, "A song could not be contained by mundanities like pain. Pain had its own resonance, its own tune," right? Like she's taking the pain and the fear, and it's, you know, it almost kills her in the process. Kind of scary. I feel like we're gonna get to a point where she does this one more time, and I don't know. Is she gonna channel every Jedi's fear into herself so they can fight? Is this her sacrifice? Is this her destiny to conquer everybody's fear?
She hoped that wherever she went, Elzar would follow. Okay. My reply to that was Planet X. Because if she's channeling everybody's fear, does she survive that? Does she take the sacrifice? Does Elzar go with her in that pursuit? I don't know.
I don't know anymore.
It scares me a little. Sometimes, like some of the Elzar and Avar moments, like really made me feel I was like, oh, they're both gonna live. They're both gonna live, and it's gonna be so delicious, and like they'll live, and it's great. And then like Avar channeling the fear, which worked, pulling the fear into herself through Buri and directing it away from Elzar. It worked, but she wasn't doing good after that. Buryaga also not doing good. I don't know.
Yeah, and this whole scene is interesting because I think the key to all of this is how do we let our fear pass through us and wash off of us? Then we see the nameless, we see them for what they are, then we can understand them and understand we got to take these beings back home, wherever they're from.
Planet X.
Which connects to the Blight, and we'll get to that in just we're so close to the Blight. But
good.
Can she do all that on her own when push comes to shove, and we gotta have this triumphant moment in Trials of the Jedi where like everybody sees clearly and does what they need to do? Is Avar the one that takes the fall? I don't know. I feel like it's going to be more of a hyperspace disaster moment where it's all the Jedi helping, and she is simply the conductor. She's the one that tells them how to channel the fear and where to move it and how to let it pass through them and where to focus it. And hopefully, you know, that gives us the happy ending where everybody just lives just this once, you know, like we've had enough dusting for a lifetime in the High Republic.
Right. Right. Yeah. I guess the question that I have is like, does this all end in triumph for our heroes or a certain sort of failure for them? And I think the obvious answer is like, well, triumph, of course, it's going to be the last book in the thing. But I'm like, we're also headed towards the end, you know, like we're also like headed towards the end of the Republic. And that makes me wonder. So I hope it's a sort of triumph in working together as opposed to the pain of loss. But the pain of loss could still be a good story. It often is.
All right. So we've talked about quite a bit here with the confrontations against the Nameless. this is the apex of the book. Like this is the moment I think you and I have been waiting for quite some time. So just to summarize, so Avar and Elzar, they learn love, they give themselves over to each other, and I think that allows them to have an anchor, something anchored within the light. Buryaga, what he learns is that you can use emotion to overcome the fear. That's kind of the key there, right? And so sort of putting these two things together, Elzar and Avar's love, Buri's empathy, Buri's use of emotion and being empathetic allows them to kind of channel all of this fear into Avar, to see the Nameless for what they truly are. And then once they, both Naboo and on this last planet, killing those Nameless, they kind of feel like shit afterwards because they see these things for what they are, right? And I think all of these details are important.
Baby.
Yeah.
Ooh, baby, never done anything wrong.
Yeah. So that's like the high level summary of everything we just talked about. It's how to overcome the fear and also seeing the truth, and maybe things aren't so scary as they think they have been. And that's where it leads us down the path now towards the Blight, the endgame, the way that the Blight is maybe a symptom of what's happening with the Nameless and how it will continue to happen because of what's happening to the Nameless. Sarah, do you want to kick off the Blight discussion? Because I know the Blight is something that you're pretty excited to talk about.
Yeah. So the Blight, guys, so you probably never heard of this thing called the Blight. I'm kidding. Before we really dive into the Blight and the super egg talkiness of it all, let's just let's recenter ourselves. Let's reread the prophecy from Master and Apprentice, written by Claudia Gray, released in 2019. You know the deal if you've been here before. Only through the sacrifice of many Jedi will the Order cleanse the sin done to the Nameless. The danger of the past is not past, but it sleeps in an egg. When the egg cracks, it will threaten the galaxy entire. When the Force itself sickens, the past and the future must split and combine. A chosen one shall come, born of no father, and through him will ultimate balance in the Force be restored. Alrighty. The chosen one, not relevant to our needs. But basically, we're here at the series again with the endgame, only through the sacrifice of many Jedi. I'm thinking about that again. But we have the sin done to the Nameless. Now we see that Buryaga, Vernestra are seeing the sin done to the Nameless. The sin done to the Nameless was taking them from their home, was pulling them from Planet X. But they are seeing now that they are not right, that they are sick, that they are emaciated, that they are pathetic, that they are off kilter in the Force. Something here is wrong. They've been used, that they've been abandoned. That egg cracking, the egg in phase 2 that birthed the Leveler, threatening the galaxy entire, now exacerbates the sin done to the Nameless because now they are being used, not just taken, but used specifically. When the Force itself sickens, we were wondering what the Force itself sickening, the past and the future must split and combine. And we got that answer, at least in our opinion, in Defy the Storm with the Blight. The Force itself is sickening. It is killing everything around it,
eating worlds.
It is off. It is odd in the Force. There's something wrong with the Blight. The key moment in chapter 63, the Blight is homesick. There's a homesickness to this sense of the Force, and something is wrong here. And it's really important that we get Bell and Buri as the people who are seeing this, because Bell has gone through such dramatic loss in the Force, especially with Loden Greystorm, like Loden being kind of the first person we lose to the Nameless. And then Buri being a friend, being somebody that he helped rescue. They've gone through it together, and Buri is this empath. Buri is this person who wants to understand, who can feel the emotions of everybody. And that's a really valuable trait that he has. Now, we go to, let me look at my notes to see how to pronounce this, because Ronap Haven. We go to Ronap Haven. We meet the medicine artists. We see that they are on the edge of the occlusion zone, could be swept into the occlusion zone at any time, but their way of life, their nature of living is tied to the trees. And they need to get together with the trees in order to have kids. That's how they live on. The trees are a really intrinsic part of their beingness. And so they can't leave. But if the blight hits Ronaphaven, they're going to die. And I think what's a really, really interesting thing, we also see the comeback of the Drengir, heyo, in this book, is that Buryaga wants to understand. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Drengir and also why Buryaga is the key to all this. Sorry, can I just yap? I'm just yapping.
Yes, please continue. That was where I was thinking of going, so it's perfect.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of like go into Marchion Ro and the Blight, because I kind of want to talk about Bell and Bury for a minute. But like, when the Drengir come back and they see that the Drengir are not doing well on these planets. Yes, they want to eat meats, but they're not doing so hot. Bury stands vigil over the dying Drengir, like twice in this book, which I think is a really remarkable thing, because the Drengir have done bad, and like pretty consciously too. They want to eat the meats, you know?
The tasty meats.
The tasty meats.
Protein only diet. Yep.
That's right. It makes him strong. But like, he feels a need to be there and to watch them pass into the forest, right? And so I think that's a really kind of powerful moment for him, because it's giving him empathy, right? Like empathy with a villain, with a antagonist. And that's so key for our understanding of Egg Chalk, is an understanding of all of these things, right? Of the Blight, of the Nameless, of the Drengir, in order to understand how to overcome them. So yeah, that's where I've got with Bury and the Drengir. I would love to know if you have any thoughts on all the yapping I've done thus far.
Yeah, I will say the unexpected twist of the Drengir coming back and Bury being sentimental towards them, I think was one of my favorite parts of this book. Because you and I have talked a lot about how the Nameless, again, the sin was that they're taken from their home, they're put into environments where they shouldn't be, and they're starved. They're used against their will by this rod, the Rod of Daybreak and the Rod of Seasons, that, you know, is a tool Marchion's family and the Evereni have had in their family since since Martyro. But it says here, you know, the whole creature roiled with feelings. Bury wanted to sue that, even though it was a monster, even though it would eat him and Bell and every sentient being on the moon. And it starts to die, and it says Bury could feel the subtleties of the Drengir's sorrow. It was lonely, cut off from the other Drengir, from the hive mind. Something had happened to cut that tie. The Drengir didn't understand what was happening to it either. And it's so sad. And I feel like Bury is not seeing the Drengir here as a monster. It's seeing it as a creature with a life. Yes, the creature has done some terrible things, but it's like, and it's heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching to read this scene, because like,
yeah,
I think Tessa did such a good job of making us feel something in this moment, to be like, damn, this sucks. Like, the Drengir are terrible, but this sucks. This is a shitty feeling. I think Bury being the one to experience that and establish some sort of empathy for something so monstrous is important, and why he might be a larger key to the Jedi understanding, hey, the Nameless are just, they don't know what's happening to themselves either, because most of what they're doing is not even by their own hand, it's by Marchion.
Right. And I think that this empathy that he is getting for our, you know, quote unquote villains, for our evil creatures is really interesting, because it's juxtaposed with how he understands the Blight. Like, he feels the sorrow and the loneliness of the Drengir, and he feels the pain and the patheticness and the abandonment of the Nameless, of like, something is wrong with them in the Force. But with the Blight, he sees that, okay, chapter 46, the Blight felt strange and sad. Empathy was how he stopped the Nameless. Maybe he could serve him here too, except it felt like nothing. It was empty. It was raw. It was, and beyond, no, part of that was a chasm of something. He couldn't quite name the feeling yet. So he like understands what he's experiencing when it comes to the Drengir and the Nameless, and that kind of is allowing him to unlock something in him. And he goes, okay, well, maybe I can use this for this different force thing as well, but he can't. He is stuck because it feels totally different. And I think that is like the key to the Blight, is that it is like fundamentally different in how in its properties than the creatures of the Nameless or the Drengir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like active and it's reaching. He describes it, whereas the Nameless is empty. It's devoid of anything. So, and when we think about like what the Blight could represent, I think there's a lot of trying to understand what it is. Like Buri's approaching it from what it is and what it's feeling, whereas Marchion on the other side is trying to understand why it's happening and how he can replicate it. Right? He's actively taking something that is like a natural, maybe unnatural phenomenon that's unexplainable and replicate it. And that doesn't usually go so well for our Star Wars villains, I'll say that much. And I don't think it's going to bode well for him.
Right.
But Buri being this, trying to understand it, I think is like so interesting. But I think the Blight is a symptom of what happened to the Nameless. If they can understand the Blight is like speaking for the Nameless, I think, in some sense. And, when we go to the end of this book, Buri is trying to reach out one more time to understand, is there something I can get, that unnamed emotion that I felt before from the Blight? Can I understand it now? And so he keeps trying to connect to it, welcome it like a friend, like part of the Force. And it says the Force, the galaxy, welcomed interconnection. At its heart, that was what the Force was. There couldn't be anything separate from it, could there? And then he's reaching out and it says it wanted something, not hunger, not quite longing. It was something more specific than that. It was Buri's eyes snapped open and he made a strangled cry at the rightness of the feeling. He knew it. He had felt it himself. Homesick. The Blight isn't homesick. The Nameless are homesick. The Nameless are feeling homesick.
And the Force is homesick. Like the Force is sick. This is everything that happens in this book is so egg talky. You know what I'm saying? Like I think I was like Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the screen when I read this. I was like, yeah, there's a place for them to go. They got to go somewhere. We got to go.
Yeah.
I know somebody who knows the path. Actually, I know two people who know the path. One of them was given it by Mari Santeka, and the other one, I'm pretty sure, has it etched into his skin.
Which we'll talk about in just a second, because we're
gonna derogatory.
Yeah. And so reading this moment, I was like, holy crap. Yes, the Nameless are homesick. They need to be returned home. They're in a place they don't belong. And because of that, the Force is sickening, and the reaction of that is the Blight. It's a manifestation of that homesickness. It's the Nameless going, I am so homesick that us being in this place is going to cause a Blight.
I think what's really interesting to mention here is the interplay between the Nameless and the Blight, right? Because we talked a little bit about the Drengir and the Blight, but the Nameless and the Blight also have a really complicated situation going on, because the Nameless avoid the Blight, right? Am I recalling that correctly?
Yeah, this is chapter 22. It actually starts with there's the egg and then the Nameless.
Yes.
There's two things. Right. Marchion's trying to test out how things react, how we can replicate it. This is part of that.
He throws a Tuca cat and another Nile into the Blight.
Shocked.
He says, and I'm just going to wait and see what happens. Okay.
A true scientist at work. Just
sicko,
try
derogatory.
But it's interesting because this is chapter 22. This is one of the last few leveler eggs, by the way. He makes note of that. This is one of the last few. They're running out of eggs. And we know from some other books that eggs are hatching and they're not surviving. The Nameless aren't surviving. That's why.
Yeah. Bulin's doing experiments, yada, yada, yada.
They want that anti-aging cream, see if that helps. But it said that the Blight moved close to the eggs, but crept around it without touching it. And it says, quote, as if the egg emitted a Blight-specific energy field. And the droid that's with Marchion says that the egg reading, the energy readings mean that it's unwell. And Marchion goes, sick, dying? And the droid says, unknown, withdrawn perhaps, or dying. Slowly, it is affected. but I can collect minimal data without being invasive. The information does not align with previous data I have access to on either the eggs or hatched creatures.
Yeah.
So it seems like the Blight doesn't want to touch the egg. It almost feels like maybe the Blight recognizes this is something that is good, something I need to protect, so I'm not going to invade on it. But
Or
the
not as
egg is
quickly.
like, because the egg knows, oh, the Blight is unnatural, and it's because we're in a place that we shouldn't be. So we're reminded of that now that we're reminded by our homesickness because of the Blight's existence. I don't know. Something going on weird
Right.
here.
Isn't there also the time when he brings two nameless onto the Blight?
Mm-hmm.
He says, and you're gonna come with me whether you like it or not.
Yeah, he's literally using the rod to direct them toward it. He's just like,
Yeah,
no,
and
you're gonna do it.
And they push against that.
Yeah, it says here, quote, the levelers groaned. One turned its face to the darkening sky, peering up as if to seek salvation there. The other one dug its claws into the dirt and shuddered. Its skin seemed to retract, its bones thrusting out of out in starved prominence. It bared its teeth and shook its head. The great levelers were afraid. And it says, not only did it spread faster, but it reached for the levelers, the edge of its consummation, bending like hands to reach for them. It wanted them. It needed them.
Yeah, that to me confirms that the Blight is a manifestation of the sickness and the force of the sin of the nameless, right? Like it's staying away from the egg because it needs the egg to hatch so it can become the creature, so it can reclaim them.
Mm-hmm.
But the creature, the nameless, are avoiding it because like reclamation is still not going home. You know, it's still not the desired end.
Yeah, I almost feel like the Blight is Planet X. Because if you're saying that the Blight needs them and it's reaching for the nameless, I almost feel like the Blight is literally Planet X saying, please come back. I need you. Maybe the Planet X is dying because of how many nameless and how many eggs were taken from the planet. And if we think of that planet as a nexus, as a living thing,
right?
Absence of the beings that make that planet alive, the planet's like, you need to come home because I'm also dying. And so it's just, it keeps searching. It's searching. And, you know, it makes sense that the only discernible pattern was that it was near the edge of wild space. All of these planets.
Right.
What's at the edge of wild space? Planet X.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Planet X is a force nexus and it has a particular force field around it and a balance that needs to be maintained. And yeah, that all makes them tracks to me. If I were writing it, I'd be like, that's what makes sense to me. Let's go.
But I love the phrase that the leveler was peering up at the sky as if to seek salvation there.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Blight being there, it recognizes something with it, and it's looking up at the sky to see home. Where is home?
Sure.
Home is my salvation. There's a lot here. And I'm very curious to see, you know, with the books we have coming up, what more we learn about the Blight. You know, we have Karis Santeka's hand on Coruscant to study. We have Aslan Rel. We have research going on with Emmerich Kaftor and Reith. So what are we going to learn? I'm looking at you, Beware the Name, or Tears of the Nameless. I'm looking at you first and foremost.
Right.
Tell me what's going on.
Soon. I think we're now kind of getting to like the last 3 chapters here. Well, we kind of talked about chapter 63 a bit, which was, you know, the homesickness that Buryaga discovers, which is like key egg talk for us. The end for Avar and Elzar, we've talked a bit about, you know, Avar pulling in the fear, directing it away from Elzar so that he can do this. And then we also kind of get like, what does the future look like for them? And they're hoping that, you know, wherever she goes, he hopes that he will follow. She hopes that he will follow a declaration of love, and they're together kind of resting in that moment after everything that's happened. But that brings us to chapter 65, where we are on Coruscant, and we get this little tag chapter that is like and what happens next. And somebody has decided to go himself to Coruscant with his newfound power that he has been researching this whole time, all by his lonesome. And that is the control of the Blight. And the control of the Blight is the key to all of this for him, because now he can control the greatest monster of all, which is the unending consuming of death, right? Like, yeah. And I just want to paint a picture of what Marchion looks like here. And we can go from there.
Yeah. The costuming is brilliant here. It's so good.
Right. So he's got a bandolier with 5 lightsaber hilts in it, just because. He's holding flowers in one hand and the rod of power in the other, flanked by 2 nameless. And he's coming to Lina So to say, you must ally with me. I am the only one who can control the Blight.
I am your only hope.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because he is wearing white and gold, the colors of the Jedi.
Yes.
And he's saying, I'm your only hope. The Jedi aren't your hope. I am. Wow. What a power play. I was shocked when he came. By the way, the nameless and the Targans on like the same landing platform, that visual to me was like, oh, I want to see them fight.
He's like attempting to match them in presence, attempting to match the Republican presence. And it's this thing of, I come here today because of a greater threat to all of us. You know the Blight appearing throughout the galaxy. It destroys everything, consumes everything. I have studied it, and you should believe me when I tell you that nothing is safe. Neither the Republic nor the Nile, not even the Hutts or Takadana mercenaries or Mandalorians, except for me.
Hey.
You know what it is, and he says, I know how to stop it. More important, I will stop it. If, Elzar Mann demanded. No if, Rose said. I don't think you understand yet. The Chancellor did not want to play this game, and she refused to ask what it is that they did not yet understand. He held her gaze, his smile twisting into amusement. He understood and simply held out the white flowers. He tipped his hand, and they fell from his palm. He said, that I am your only hope. You know, like, yeah.
This felt
notes.
very Game of Thronesy to me. When like later in Game of Thrones, they like Daenerys Targaryen and Jon Snow and all of them, they are able to get their hands on a White Walker, and they bring the White Walker to King's Landing, and they're like, hey, I know we're all fighting over the throne, but like, look at this thing. Winter is coming, by the way, and here's proof. And so to me, that kind of felt like this moment of like, there is a Blight, here's a flower, watch it turn to ash and blow in the wind. You think I'm your threat? No, I'm your salvation. Listen to me now. Here is a gift freely given. Me. I'm your gift freely given. I'm going to rule and help. And you're going to give me power.
Okay, White Walkers are humanoid creatures. They literally brought a guy, and they were like, look at this guy.
Yeah, they literally brought him on dragon. They like went north of the wall into where the White Walkers live, basically, and they
grabbed him
almost
and they were
all
like,
died. Yeah. And they grabbed
like,
him.
hey,
yeah. It's a really
guy.
dramatic, like, I'll show you the scene after we're done, but like, it's a really good scene. But that to me is what this felt like. It was just like, I'm the least of your worries, so you're going to start listening to me from now on. And I wonder if he's going to linger on Coruscant, and this is now he's going to have a place here. We didn't talk a lot about Ghira Staros, but like throughout this book, she's mostly chilling on Coruscant, and you know, she has a lunch with Elzar and Lina So, and she kind of tries to justify the presence of the Nile and what they do. And she's like, you know, the Nile and the occlusion zone is a place for people that feel like outcasts. Like, we offer people a different path who don't want to be part of the Republic. And Lena's like, oh, so you're gonna do that through violence? Like, do you not recognize the oppression that you carry out? You know, you're ruling through violence. And Ghira challenges that, and it's like, can you never pretend the Jedi and even the Republic have never pressed their rule onto anybody? And there's this like real back and forth ping ponging between them of like, who has the moral high ground? And there's just a lot of that throughout the book. And props to Lina So, you know, her son is behind the occlusion zone. She never budges in her stance on this. And I think that was pretty inspiring for her to like hold that ground, especially when Ghira kind of dangles that in her face and is like, well, can you tell me where my daughter is? Maybe
Right.
maybe I'll know a little something about your son if you tell me that. And she's like, nope,
Hmm.
not playing that game.
There's a lot of chess pieces that are moving by the end of this book.
Totally. And if Marchion's gonna be there with Gira and all of them, oh, I don't want to be at that dinner. That's gonna be.
No, do not invite me. No, no.
Guess who's coming to dinner? It's Marchion Ro.
Yikes.
We didn't talk a ton about Marchion, but I think it's worth mentioning like Marta Ro and her presence throughout this book.
The haunting of Marta Ro.
Because him showing up at the end bearing flowers, like almost resembling Marta Ro in a way.
That was 100% in my notes. I said the huge Marta energy.
Yeah. And so I really loved her presence throughout this, her being this manifestation, it's a curse for the Everready to see old ancestors. And, Marchion says he does not speak to the dead if he could help it. Her outfits kind of change as he sees her throughout the book. Sometimes she's wearing pristine white. Sometimes she's wearing her gray. Sometimes her mouth is dripped with blood, and I find her presence just interesting. We see him go into the secret sanctum on the gaze electric where he puts his thumb on her tooth. She has a tooth there.
Yeah.
That's like
to have him bleed, and if any non-Everready tries to enter, it will self-destruct. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, oh, that's so
Sick,
interesting.
twisted.
Yeah. When he goes into that sanctum and he comes out, all the gaze electric is turning to ash, and she's dropping lompop flowers everywhere.
Right.
And what's interesting about her is she's saying, maybe it's something I did. She's just whispering that to herself. And Marchion thinks, maybe it's something I did, the ghost had said earlier, as she dropped ashing flowers and blighted footsteps in her wake. Maybe it was. Or maybe spreading it was something he could do. Rose smiled. This was exciting. And I think you can draw a line to that, to the end of this book that we're talking about. He's saying, maybe it's something I can do, the blight. I can do something with it. But him saying that Marta's muttering, maybe it's something I did. I wonder if she's thinking, is what is going on with the blight because of something I did? Did I do something wrong?
Well, but also we know that this is not actually Marta. It's a manifestation through Marchion. Tessa said this.
But, maybe if it is a manifestation, and it is, we know that he has a lot of history with what his great-great-grandmother Marta wrote down in her journals.
Right.
So maybe he's taking what he knows and what he knows about his family's history and manifesting it all into her. And so he knows maybe something went wrong all those eons ago. And I don't know. I just find it very interesting, and her kind of being a witness to what he's doing throughout the book. Her asking, do you think there is freedom and peace? Just kind of posing these questions, these philosophical questions to him to really test his patience and to guide him in the right directions to draw the conclusions that he does. I just find it fascinating.
I also really like the line that he has about Marta, where it's like he didn't talk to ghosts, but sometimes he listened.
Yeah, totally.
I was like, he's messed up. He's messed up.
And I think one thing in particular, and you mentioned it earlier, was the paths on his chest. There's also a scene where he takes a mirror out of the throne on the gaze electric, and he starts using it to like figure out the maps on his chest. He does confirm Maria Santeca had drawn the paths on him. In the mirror now, the result was beautiful. But it says here, he found the lines he needed, quote, the oldest path.
Planet X. And in this essay, I will.
It says, the Jedi had found Marie's secret somehow, treachery, hope, luck, but this new one could be discovered only on his dead body.
And in Vernestra's mind.
The Jedi had found Marie's secret somehow. So that's the home key, right? That they use to go back and forth with the storm wall. He thinks this oldest path is just on his chest. But yeah, to your point, I think Marie Santeca gave Vernestra also the oldest path.
She Galen Urso'd it. I built a little flaw in there, and I'm gonna tell somebody. Just one person.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That'll come back into the picture at some point.
Oh, definitely.
Do you think Vernestra makes the connection at some point if they do find that, if Ro dies and she sees that marking on his body, she'll recognize it. Because she's seen it drawn in the sand before.
She's seen it, yeah.
By Deva Lampam.
Oh my God. Can you
Marchion dies. She goes, wait, I know that.
No, what if Marchion dies early in, like relatively, like halfway through trials, and then she's like, oh shit. Hey guys, I know about this one. We got to bring them back to their. Oh boy. Wow. Wow.
There's some juicy stuff there.
Yeah. Well, all right. Let's give it a couple months and we'll find out.
We didn't talk a lot about Vernestra, but shout out to her battling with Marchion at the end of this. I thought that was pretty cool. While she's trying to tangle with the Drengir and the Nile, Marchion comes in and is like, don't mess with my plans. I'm trying something right now. Please leave.
Which is so funny. It's like, just leave. There's a lot of like characters and stuff that we haven't really talked about because I think there's just so much good meat for the things that are at the very, very top of our list of interests in the High Republic, which is like Avzar and Egtok. But I just have to hand it to characters like Gira, characters like Avon, characters like Care and Xylan, who we love, like all these characters that we really enjoy, that are playing really, really important roles in this book, but are just a little bit in the periphery to a lot of what we discussed today.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on Avar and Elzar, but I think really that's where the meat of this book is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That relationship and the importance of love in a galaxy torn apart by fear and war.
Yeah.
I think that leads us maybe to our odds and ends here as we start to wrap up, and maybe some of those other characters might be included here as well as a quick shout out. I think there's a couple, but odds and ends, it's the things that we didn't get to in our discussion, but want to make mention of before the end of our conversation. So Sarah, do you have any that you want to start with?
My notes are all odds and ends. They're all just like little, very chaotic. I really like it that sometimes Marta's ghost appears and her mouth drips blood. I thought that was really, really curious. Oh, I also thought it was interesting that Marchion Ro is on this planet there. He has like false kyber that he's creating and mining in order to power the Stormwall. So now that we know that Ilum has been destroyed in the sequel trilogy, and we also know that we're going to get this new Jedi movie with an older Rey post sequel trilogy, I wonder how new eras of Jedi and other folks who use kyber will mine kyber since Ilum is gone. So that is just something that's on my mind and wanted to point out.
Fake kyber.
Lab grown kyber. It's a little more ethical.
I want to make mention of Care Santeca, particularly the moment when he returns to Naboo and he's going through this whole routine that like changes outfits. He gets a little wine drunk and it says, quote, "It was easy to put a sway in his walk, a sexy, slightly hungover way." And I felt like that was very Luthen Rail of him, like when Luthen goes back to Coruscant and he's like dressing up and he's putting on the new look, his like persona that he has in his shop. And he's like, he's like flaunting his hands and is in the mirror and pretending to do the poses that he needs to do. And so I thought of that, like when Care was putting on this character at the end when he got off the ship, it needs to look like he wasn't being a freedom fighter, basically. And he was just off drunk gambling at a casino somewhere, basically. Nothing more to look at. Right. I do really love Care, by the way. I think he's incredible. I love that he's really taking on this role in the book. And we didn't even talk about the morale drops that he does with Avar, how he records some messages.
Yeah.
And he fires those off to inspire hope in the galaxy. Because he knows that to give people hope is the best thing that they can aim for. He's working with Ril Darrow and Belen, the Ugnaught from Eye of Darkness. And just this like declaration of fighting the good cause that he makes, ignoring the fear of getting caught. To him, it's worth death because he had spent so much of his life serving his family, and now he wants to do something like for a greater good. So I just think that was really cool. I think he's a great character. And I love that he's just bringing hope to people beyond the storm wall in a very, very dangerous way.
Right. I agree. He's great. I really appreciate his presence in this book. And another one that I bring up is this quote from Avon, who I love so dearly. And we all know Gira is about winning at all costs, essentially. And Avon says, "I'd rather be proud of you, even if you're dead," which is just like, ooh, get her. Avon continues to be perfect. I love you. Pat on the head. Good work.
I loved that scene. That was a sting though. And I wonder what that means for Gira's trajectory. You know, like, does this conversation sit with her? Does she maybe have a change of heart knowing what Marchion's trying to achieve with the Blight? I'll be curious. Speaking of Avon, this isn't a conversation with Elzar, but Elzar mentions she's talking about subspace frequencies and power arrays that could somehow harness natural resonances of the vacuum of space. And I found that interesting because back in Quest for Planet X, Skygraph was investigating supraluminite tracing that used like a resonator and compass, and could use the actual resonance of objects to pinpoint maybe where they came from.
Right.
In the Shadows of Starlight, Yoda learned about this and they went to the Graph planet, and Aslan Rel proceeded to destroy it and blow it up. So he's like, you're never getting to where the Nameless came from, basically. Good luck.
Right. Great work, Aslan Rel.
And so part of me thinks Avon Staros is completing what Skygraph started. I think Avon is maybe perfecting or knowing about this theory that Skygraph came up with, and is trying to recreate that compass or resonator. What could they use the compass for? Maybe to point in the direction of Planet X. Well, wouldn't they need an object to show the resonance where it came from? Oh, wait.
The Kazrat device.
No.
That's not what you were going to say.
Not quite.
Oh.
But
okay,
they do have a hand that is blighted.
They do have a hand. Oh my God, we do have a hand. That was blighted.
Have a hand.
Yeah.
So maybe perhaps they use the blighted hand with Avon's invention / Skygraph's invention. And then maybe Vernestra comes in with Avon and is like, hey, I got some paths. And then together they kind of figure out where the heck they need to go. So I don't know. I feel like that's important.
Is Kara's hand the key to all of this?
Maybe. You know, original episode 7 opening was Luke's hand floating in hyperspace or whatever. So maybe we're just coming full circle now, and hands are a language and hands are important to the Star Wars.
Right. Oh, that's so ridiculous. I love it. That's so silly. That's so Star Wars. Never change. Never change. The severed hand. I don't have any more. Do you have any more odds and ends? I didn't do a good job of writing them down.
Only one I have is Porter Engle. Just want to give him a shout out. You know, he has a couple of moments in this book where he's ready to give it all in the fight against General Weiss and sacrifice himself if it means killing her. Like, his life will be worth it. But he finds hope with Avar's message that Care gets out to the galaxy, and you know, recognizing that she made it outside of the storm wall. But most importantly, Weiss says, I know where your sister is. And that's kind of huge. So is she lying? Is she telling the truth? We know she gets away after she says that. So I'll be curious to see where Porter's journey goes. And I feel like with Charles writing Trials of the Jedi, Porter will probably be a big part of that book, because he's been a big part of the last 2 novels, adult novels. So I would imagine he's got a much larger role to play. And I'm just curious how his search for Barash will fit into all of this and why that might be relevant. And maybe Barash knows something, because they were both around 150 years ago. So I don't know.
It's so interesting to me how Porter has become important in Phase 3 in a way that I don't think we could have necessarily quite expected from the guy who makes 9 Egg Stew. You know, like, not that we know he's the Blade. We know he's super important and is super valuable and old and all this stuff, but I just didn't quite expect his trajectory among all the characters in the High Republic, I think. And so I feel completely in the dark of where his endgame is, but I'm very curious to find out, because he keeps on living. And I lied. I do have one more, and it's just, Kevin Tar.
Kevin Tar.
Kevin Tar.
He is in this book.
He's in this book. Yeah.
We're 2 for
That's
2. If Kevin
Yep.
Tar is not in Trials of the Jedi, I will throw my book away. You heard it here first.
Uh-oh. Authors,
Done.
you better write Kevin Tar into the books. Else he's gonna be done.
I love him working with Avon. That's exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want
Absolutely.
them doing science stuff.
I love smart people, you know?
Right, because I'm not smart, so I like reading about smart people.
Right.
Yep.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Low IQ individual here who's going to wrap up the
No.
podcast. Let's go.
Okay.
Totally kidding. Can you tell I'm tired?
We need to eat.
We need to eat food.
Yeah.
So that is the end of our discussion here today on
Food
Temptation
is what
of the
stops
Force.
us.
I know we probably glossed over quite a bit. And if we have more to say later on, we can always come back and revisit and talk even more about this book because it was definitely one that stuck with us. And
Yes.
I cannot wait for the rest of phase 3. But I can wait because I don't want it to end. So
That's right.
We got about 8 more months of this and then we're done. 8 to 9 more months.
A whole child. A whole child could be brought into the world. And once it's here, no more High Republic.
Well, Sarah, thank you for joining me today. As always, for our listeners, you can find more of us on our Twitter and Instagram, everything that we're up to. Subscribe to wherever you listen to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you name it. We got a lot more book discussions in the pipeline. And if you enjoyed the episode, this is a little bit of a chonker here today, but leave us a review. Let us know if you enjoyed and stay tuned.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time and for everybody who joins us on these High Republic journeys. We are so grateful for you. I hope you are choosing light in life. To live is to choose every day. And thank you to our patrons who help keep the lights on at Friends of the Force so we can record super long episodes. So thank you to Brian, Ben, Cheryl, Clay, David, Emma, Jennifer, Katie, Knights of Ren, Krista, Leanne, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Matthew, Nathan, Nicole, Rob, Ruth, Santa, Sky Talkers, Tom, and Travis. We're very grateful for you. I hope everybody is staying hydrated, staying well, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
Yes. Until next time, everybody, may the Force be with you always.